welcome. Good morning. It's my sincere pleasure to welcome you all to this high-level opening session of the inaugural Berlin Climate Mobility Forum. My name is Sarah Rosengartner. I'm the Deputy Managing Director of the Global Center for Climate Mobility. And on behalf of the Robert Bosch Stiftung, our hosts, and the GCCM, it's my sincere pleasure to welcome you all, especially our high-level guests, but all of you, to join us here for this important discussion this morning. The forum is a first of its kind. It is part of our ongoing effort to build a global ecosystem of climate mobility champions from governments, from the private sector, civil society, affected communities, academia, to jointly advance solutions, a common agenda on climate mobility. We have set out this forum with 5 objectives. You'll find them in the program, but I want to highlight especially centering data and knowledge as a source of policy solutions, centering community experiences and the need for localization in financing, in our solutions, in our discussions. And lastly, maintaining momentum and international cooperation, leadership at this moment in time when climate is slipping down the priority list of international items. This morning, we have a distinguished group of leaders that are taking this issue to the international fora and are jointly leading the advocacy on making climate mobility a core piece of international climate cooperation. And I'm very pleased to call our first round of speakers to the podium. I would ask all our high-level guests seated to my right to please take your seats on the stage. I have first Dr. Bernhard Straub, the CEO of the Robert Bosch Stiftung. Please, if you would join me. And please a round of applause as they come up. Professor Kamal Amakrane, the Managing Director of the Global Center for Climate Mobility. We have with us Ms. Rita Schwarzelühr-Sutter, Parliamentary State Secretary in the Federal Ministry for Environment of Germany. His Majesty King Letsie III of Lesotho, welcome. His Excellency Mr. Mokgweetsi Masisi, former President of Botswana. And last but not least, Ms. Luisa Neubauer, climate justice activist here in Germany and our youth voice on the panel. Welcome. So without further ado, I would like to ask our welcome speaker, Mr. Bernhard Straub, to come to the podium to give the welcome remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Your Majesty, dear ministers, dear excellencies, dear guests, welcome. With deep honor, I greet you here at the premises of the Robert Bosch Foundation. And it's truly a privilege to host this event. It's a gathering of distinguished guests. We have leaders from government, from private sector, from multinational institutions, civil society, from philanthropy, academia. So welcome very much. We very much appreciate this diversity in this group. Your presence here is a recognition of the importance that you give to this topic, and I truly applaud your support, even in times, as you rightly said, when climate change and climate mobility seems to be slipping a little bit from the agenda. Let me also extend my sincere gratitude to our esteemed partners of the Global Center for Climate Mobility, and in particular to its director, Kamal Amakrane, for their tireless support and their passion for working for climate mobility and in organizing this forum. Also, I do not want to forget to mention those people who actually are behind us, who are the teams who organize this. And pas pro toto, I want to mention David Lundberg and Rafaela Schweiger. This is the crew that is organizing this, many more who make this possible. Also a great thank you to you. We stand at a critical juncture where climate action is not just a necessity, but it's becoming urgent. For years, the need to act has been acknowledged, and yet when we try to put it on the agenda and get action and governments moving to implement effective change, we need to acknowledge that we are falling short. The speed, the depth, the breadth is not there what we need to do. The recognition of climate mobility in international frameworks and institutions over the past years was a significant achievement. But the shifting geopolitical landscape, what's happening in the global sphere politically as well as militarily, as well as on the people's side, is shifting perspectives, is shifting attention, it is shifting the priorities in this world. And we fear that climate change and climate mobility and climate justice is pushed down in the agenda of the political discourse. For many countries, this might be a matter of inconvenience, but for those countries that are most affected, it's definitely an injustice. We are coming here together at this forum for a shared objective. We want to shape a common, coordinated, and a human-centered response to the defining challenge of this century. We gather here because climate mobility can no longer be treated as a secondary concern. It's a central pillar with climate action, with adaptation, and, as I already said, with justice. And it's time we address it as such, with ambition, but also with humility, because we have failed in many ways, but with urgency, but also with dedication and with passion. We stand at a very pivotal point. At the end of 2024, of the displaced persons, the majority, 45 million, were displaced by weather-related shocks. There's a twofold increase over the previous decade, and we know those who contributed least are affected the most. Still, climate change is a global phenomenon. Yes, affected are those that are most vulnerable, and unfortunately, the most vulnerable are not those who had the greatest contribution to climate change. But we mustn't fool ourselves. Climate change is a global phenomenon, and every country is going to be affected. So it is very adequate to hold this forum in Berlin, but also because also Germany, also Europe, feels the impact of climate change. And it's not a logistical issue, it is an issue of a political signal. We share the challenge and we share the responsibility. There are gaps between the commitments in action, and we will lament these gaps that we have. But what gives us hope is that people like you are coming together here, not just here, but coming together here to change and forge an agenda and to forge action on the ground, but also in collaboration across borders. It is important that we need the persistence and the dedication for those that lead this change. And it's reflected in the presence of you all here that you join in this endeavor. Let me also add maybe a bit of a personal perspective. I joined the COP27, that's quite some time ago, but I joined COP27, was the first COP that I joined, and apart from the gathering like we have today here, I was most impressed with the youth delegates. Youth delegates from different countries joined, and they gave individual accounts of how they deal with the consequences of climate change, how they adapt through mobility, how they adopt measures, how to recreate a living environment that is just and human-centered. I was particularly struck by their optimism. It might be the wrong word maybe, but it was an optimism. And I feel if the youngsters carry that flame forward, I speak of myself as an old guy, I need to be humble and to say, if the youngsters can do it, I need to do my job, and I hope that together we will feel that obligation as well. No single sector can deal with this justice, with this issue. We need for climate justice, for the climate action, we need all actors, whether it's politics, whether it's philanthropy, whether it's industry or academia. This is a very complicated issue, and it is not a recipe book issue. It is an issue where the best efforts need to be combined and to be tested and retested, but we must never give up. We as philanthropy, we will do our part. We can be convener, but we also support in a very precise, let's say, surgical way this opportunity. And we want to be the partner for all this. And that's why we're very happy that you come here together in the premises of the Robert Bosch Foundation. It's in the very center of Berlin. The German federal office is just 5 walking minutes away. Many other political institutions are in the vicinity. So maybe it's also an opportunity to reach out outside these 4 walls and to make contact with the political world in Berlin. Let's not call it a bubble. It's the political world in Berlin. I hope that today and tomorrow will be ample opportunity to listen to our distinguished guests, the panelists, but also to discuss and find new connections and communication channels for joint action either here or afterwards. It is our honor to have you here to be the co-host together with the GCCM. And with this, I wish us all 2 very fruitful days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bernhard, for these words, and thank you for highlighting the important role of the youth. We are very pleased to have our inaugural cohort of youth fellows with us at this conference, and for the next 2 weeks actually here in Berlin, they're starting what is now our new Climate Mobility Academy. So they'll be learning, exchanging for 2 weeks on climate mobility topics, and I hope you'll all get a chance to meet them and be introduced. 12 amazing young people from all parts of the world. We're very excited to have you. Without further ado, I'd like to turn to my boss, Professor Kamal Amakrane, for his introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Dear friends, distinguished guests, Your Majesty, Excellencies, it is a pleasure to be with you here. And I would need to thank the Robert Bosch Foundation for making this possible. I would like to thank Bernhard and his team led by Rafaela and others for being a steadfast partner, a solid pillar on which we leaned as we press forward our shared efforts. A lot will be heard today, and I was asked to put some context, as you will hear stories from the Pacific, from my continent, from Africa, from the Caribbean, but also voices from colder places, from the north, where it's same challenges, same resolve, but different storylines. As you all know, for frontline communities, home is more than a place. Home encompasses all the social, spiritual bonds and practices that tie people to their land, to their ancestors, to their heritage. It is who they are, it is their identity. Regrettably, with increasing climate shocks, it is that very bond that is being undermined, with some regrettably forced or left with no choice than to let go the places they called home for generations. These are the human faces of the climate crisis. We can discuss 1.5, we can discuss CO2, we can discuss many technological and technical aspects. But if you want human faces on the climate crisis, it's those who are the most impacted and those who have to give in and give up almost everything in order to adapt. At the Global Center for Climate Mobility, it has been our mission to work closely with affected communities to enable a positive adaptation journey, because they have acknowledged that adaptation is needed and necessary. And our goal, our mission is how to make it positive and a journey, not a shock. And this relates particularly both to upholding the right to adaptation, but also the right to stay. We, through research, study, and science, can attest today that as it relates to climate change shocks, human mobility and adaptation, people do not want to leave the places they call home. People want to adapt locally. We can have a whole conversation about economic opportunities for a specific group of people, for those who have to join their loved ones and have to reunite, and those who migrate for health reasons and others. But when it comes to the climate shocks and climate change, people want to stay home. And I think it's our obligation as we come together to provide those solutions for these communities to adjust locally. And I have heard it repeatedly, whether in the Pacific, in the Caribbean, or the African continent. People do not want to go far from home. Why? Because there is always the hope that they will go back. Yesterday, we were even discussing some who have left the will or the demand to be buried back home if they happen to leave this world on a different place. All this just to emphasize that as we discuss climate justice, we discuss climate action, the consensus is different as it relates to human mobility. In closing, one hand can clap. And this is why we are today here, to bring as many hands together, to be as loud as together, to celebrate their stories, to acknowledge their journeys, and to bring together all the energies to support them in a transition that has to be just and in a journey that has to be positive. Thank you again to the Bosch Stiftung, and thank you again to our distinguished speakers and guests, and thank you for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamal. Before I invite our next speaker, I would invite you to join me in watching a short film about the rising nations, speaking to the human faces that Kamal just mentioned. I would say film up.
Ocean sciences indicates that sea levels are rising faster than even the gloomiest forecasts have predicted. The United Nations says the world is heading in the wrong direction. There's a 48% chance that global temperatures will rise by 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Stressing the need for dramatic cuts in greenhouse gases.
Is literally a broken climate promise.
Repercussion for countries that don't meet the goals that they have put out there.
How likely is it that world leaders will, in fact, do something? our people, in my generation or the next, will be unable to exist in the islands that have nurtured our ancestors for centuries.
I wouldn't actually define myself as a climate activist or an activist. I'm just someone trying to save my home.
It is our vision that we would like to maintain and preserve this paradise, regardless of climate change and sea level rise.
We want our future descendants to look back and thank their ancestors for doing all that they can to save Tuvalu.
The existential threat we face is not our making, but it will remake us. We need a global settlement. It must recognize and protect our cultural integrity, our human and economic capital, and our sovereignty. It must be co-created and enacted with the people and the governments of our nations. Because if the international community allows an entire country to disappear from climate change, what hope will be left for anyone else?
That is not an easy setup to follow. I would like to invite Ms. Rita Schwarzelühr-Sutter to join us and deliver the host country remarks on behalf of Germany.
Your Majesty, Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all here in Berlin for the opening of the first Berlin Climate Mobility Forum. As the Parliamentary State Secretary at the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Climate Action, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, I'm particularly honored to see you here, and of you may come a very long way, in many cases from across the globe, to meet here in Germany to discuss the key topic of climate mobility. And I know when we saw the movie and the pictures, the islands, the small developing islands, especially in the Pacific, it's a long trip to Germany, and it's another on the other side of the world. I was there in 2014 at in Samoa for the Samoa pathway. And 10 years after, I think it's urgent that we cooperate much more than ever. And we saw in the movie what the people need. And as you know, Germany has a new government since last month under the leadership of Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Together we have decided to streamline our climate work by concentrating competences within the Federal Ministry for the Environment, bring together international climate negotiations and financing experts from the Federal Foreign Office and the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. Minister Carsten Schneider and myself, together with State Secretary Jochen Flassbart, some of you have heard this name, look forward to continuing this crucial work on international climate action with all of you. And of course, we will continue working together with our colleagues at the Federal Foreign Office and at BMZ on the topic of today's forum, namely of climate mobility and how forced displacement has become the face of the climate crisis. I fully agree with the organizers that we need to work together to advance a common agenda that empowers positive adaptation journeys for communities on the front lines of the climate crisis. We need to make sure that people and communities are resilient in the face of climate change and that they can adapt as best as possible to climate impacts. I would like to highlight 3 elements that are central to our engagement in the fight against climate change in the context of climate mobility. First and foremost, we need to have global greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 to keep the 1.5 degree within reach. To achieve this, we need NDCs in line with 1.5 Celsius. All sectors and gases, especially from major emitters. The EU and Germany are also pushing for a space to respond to the collective efforts reflected in the NDCs at COP30 this year in Belém. And I think we are responsible. I was at the COP15 in Paris, 10 years after. I think we have to hurry up. Second, we need more investment in climate protection, adaptation, and economic transformation. But we also need to make greater progress in providing and mobilizing climate finance, especially for the least developed countries and small island states, and start implementing the new climate finance goal agreed at COP29 as a global effort. Enabling adaptation remains a priority for Germany. We can reassure you of your ongoing commitment to support vulnerable countries, and we will continue to contribute our fair share. While public funding will play a critical role, we need to think of ways to significantly increase private investments and make adaptation a business case. At the same time, facilitating access to adaptation finance, in particular for the most vulnerable, is crucial to truly create impact and overall climate justice. Third, I want to send a message of solidarity of those affected by climate impacts and facing an uncertain future. We are with you and we will not leave you alone. Climate change is a social issue. That is why Germany is taking measures both to reduce our own domestic emissions and to cooperate with you all. Germany, through GFFO, has been one of the earliest supporters of the Global Center for Climate Mobility and especially of the African Climate Mobility Initiative, the Greater Caribbean Climate Mobility Initiative, and of course, the Rising Nation Initiative. Together with our friends from Tuvalu, we also co-share the Coalition for Addressing Sea Level Rise and Existential Threat in New York, through which we are putting the threat of sea level rise on the UN agenda. And I'm particularly happy that last year we started a 2-year process at the UN General Assembly on threats of sea level rise, which culminate in 2026 with another high-level meeting in New York. From beginning on, Germany has supported the UN Climate Security Mechanism and its crucial interagency approach to develop holistic solutions. After several postings in South Sudan, Senegal, and in the Horn of Africa, we are happy to announce that through the CSM, we just recently established a new climate and security advisor based at the Pacific Island Forum in Fiji to provide expertise for all Pacific Island states and support them in building sustainable resilience. During the last COPs, together with leading partners, Germany has also been a core supporter of important initiatives to increase climate resilience and stability in fragile contexts, such as the COP28 Declaration and on Climate Relief, Recovery and Peace at the COP29, call on climate action for peace, relief and recovery. The Berlin Climate Mobility Forum takes place just at the right time, following the UNOC, the UN Ocean Conference last week, which many of you attended and where Minister Schneider opened our side event on sea level rise with Minister Maina Talia from Tuvalu. And in just a few days, many of you will continue on to Bonn for the SB's 62 meetings to prepare the COP 2030 in Belém. Now is the time for all of us to share insights on and to learn from each other how we can best answer the challenges posed by climate mobility. I'm truly grateful to our partners from the Robert Bosch Foundation and the Global Center for Climate Mobility for organizing this conference. Thank you very much. It's so important and we have so important speakers today. We need to learn from each other, from local actors, from your actors, and across the sectors in general. And I'm confident that the discussions and exchanging taking place at the first Berlin Climate Mobility Forum will prove very valuable to foster more collaboration and closer partnerships between all of us in the face of climate change. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schwarzelühr-Sutter. I would like to invite our keynote addresses. Our first speaker is His Majesty King Letsie III of Lesotho. Your Royal Highness, I would invite you to the podium for your remarks.
Your Excellency, President Mokgweetsi Masisi, former President of the Republic of Botswana, Professor Kamal, Amakrane, Managing Director of the Global Center for Climate Mobility, Dr. Bernhard Straub, CEO of the Robert Bosch Foundation, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by expressing my profound gratitude to the Global Center for Climate Mobility for displaying visionary leadership in organizing this historic first ever Berlin Climate Mobility Forum. This groundbreaking initiative provides a vital platform to accelerate partnerships by enabling collaboration across sectors, regions, and constituencies, building a common agenda and developing concrete approaches to address the complex realities of climate mobility. The Kingdom of Lesotho is deeply honored to participate in this landmark event, which marks a significant milestone in our collective journey to advance human-centered, justice-oriented responses to the multifaceted challenges of climate change. I take this opportunity to personally thank you, President Masisi, and you, Dr. Straub, for the invitation extended to me and my delegation. It is a privilege to stand alongside you and other global leaders as we work together to forge meaningful and lasting solutions to the mounting climate-induced challenges facing our people, particularly the most vulnerable. Ladies and gentlemen, Lesotho's climate is generally classified as temperate with alpine characteristics. We experience hot summers and relatively cold winters, with temperatures often lower than those in countries at similar latitudes due to our elevation. Our lowest point sits at 1,400 meters above sea level. Our 4 distinct seasons are marked by wide fluctuations in temperature and erratic rainfall patterns. Snowfall, a regular occurrence between May and September, can be so intensive at times that it isolates rural communities, cutting them off from access to health services, education, and economic opportunities. These climatic and geographic conditions, when combined with socio-economic vulnerabilities, make Lesotho one of the most exposed countries in the world to the impacts of climate change. Impact assessments across sectors, water, agriculture, infrastructure, land use, and health, reveal a deeply concerning picture. The findings confirm that Lesotho's ecosystems and livelihoods are acutely vulnerable to rising temperatures, shifting precipitation patterns, land degradation, and extreme weather events. Increasingly, these climate-related pressures are no longer just environmental or economic. They are becoming deeply human. We are witnessing the rising of the phenomenon of climate mobility. Recent national assessments show that 18% of internal migration in Lesotho is directly attributable to climate change. These figures must be seen not as mere statistics, but as urgent calls for action. Communities in the highlands and in the lowland rural areas, traditionally dependent on subsistence agriculture and livestock, are experiencing crop failures, loss of arable land, and deteriorating water access. As a result, families are forced to make difficult decisions, whether to stay and struggle or to move in search of better prospects. This trend is most visible among youth and women, who are not only disproportionately affected, but are increasingly on the move, either to urban centers or across borders. This pattern is echoed across the continent. Africa is becoming a front line of climate mobility, with millions displaced or migrating due to desertification, floods, droughts, and failed harvests. The resulting rural to urban migration, cross-border movements, and seasonal displacement are reshaping our social fabric, straining urban infrastructure and testing our resilience as nation states. But let us be clear. For Lesotho and many parts of the continent, climate mobility is not inherently a crisis. It is a powerful form of adaptation. It reflects the agency of individuals and communities making difficult but strategic choices for survival and dignity. Our challenge as policymakers is to ensure that climate mobility is safe, voluntary, dignified, and planned, not forced, desperate, or chaotic. Ladies and gentlemen, Lesotho's young people and women are not passive victims of climate disruption. They are already agents of resilience and innovation. Their leadership in developing climate mobility solutions can serve as a lever for transforming our adaptation strategies from reactive to anticipatory. By involving youth and women at every stage of the climate mobility conversation, from community-based planning to national policy, we can craft solutions that are more inclusive, context-specific, and effective. We urgently need whole-of-society approaches that prioritize participation, ownership, and inclusion. Climate mobility must be integrated across adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage strategies. It must be embedded in our nationally determined contributions, national adaptation plans, national development strategies, disaster risk reduction frameworks, and all climate-relevant policy domains. Lesotho is committed to making climate mobility a key element of climate change planning. This includes allocating dedicated resources for women and youth-led climate education, ensuring that community-based knowledge is not only acknowledged, but actively shapes our national policies. The government of Lesotho is also working to strengthen institutional frameworks to better anticipate, monitor, and respond to climate-induced movements. Whole-of-society approaches will guide the development of our NDCs, NAPs, technology needs assessments, gender action plans, capacity building initiatives, and resource mobilization strategies. We will center our communities, not just as recipients of policy, but as co-creators of solutions. I urge all leaders and policymakers present to take the same approach. Let us create national and regional platforms for the exchange of knowledge and experience on climate mobility. Let us incorporate the outcomes of these platforms into our formal climate strategies, ensuring that our responses are locally anchored and globally aligned. We cannot afford to treat climate mobility as a peripheral issue. It is a core challenge of our time, and also a central pathway to resilience, equity, and opportunity. This forum, this moment, must be a turning point. Let us leave Berlin with more than shared concerns. Let us leave with concrete commitments to protect those on the move, to empower the next generation, and to embed climate mobility at the heart of our climate response. The government of Lesotho stands ready to partner, to learn, and to lead alongside you in this transformative journey. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for being part of this historic forum. Thank you.
Your Majesty, King Letsie, thank you for your words of wisdom. I recall a recent conversation with a policymaker telling me our challenge are not the resources or the technology for adaptation. Our challenge is how to deal with the communities and get their buy-in. And so your call for a whole-of-society approach is very much urgent and needed. And in this spirit, I would like to invite our next speaker, Ms. Luisa Neubauer, who has been the face of the German climate movement, especially the youth activism, and we're very much looking forward to your thoughts on this topic.
Thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you so much for having me, dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm impressed and inspired by the words we heard this morning and by a very beautiful breakfast before. And I'm glad to share some perspectives on today's and tomorrow's occasion. Last night, before going to bed, I checked my phone, like I guess most of us, and I just didn't know. I didn't know whom to reach out first. To my Iranian friends, who are losing their minds this very moment. To my friends in the US, who can't comprehend what is happening to them. To my colleagues in the West Bank, who have lost their words to describe the horror. To my contact in Sudan, who has found that the collapse of her home has become a by the way emergency. Oh, by the way, there's an issue in Sudan. Or should I first reach out to my grandmother of 92 years, back in my hometown Hamburg, who is wondering whether her body will make it through the very heat wave outside. As the privileged among us are trying to distribute their attention and solidarity equally, and those at the front lines are trying to distribute what there is left to survive from equally, I'm witnessing a new desperation creeping into the conversations and discussions and bedtime talks. We know that the wars and crises out there are connected, and worse, we know that every imaginable crisis is accelerated by the climate and ecological emergency. We know that every centigrade of degrees intensifies climate catastrophes, the droughts, the floods, the heat, the inequality. Science has shown and shown and shown again that for the first time in the history of humankind, our planetary systems are likely to collapse. Not accidentally collapse, but because we make them to. And with every bit of planetary and climate stability we lose homes and habitats and freedoms and futures and foundations of what should be just economies and communities. And as always, those who are losing the most are usually those who've contributed the least. Yet right now, in this very precise moment, as climate action would be more necessary than ever, we see leader after leader turning away. What feels like yesterday, world leaders at the COP climate conference officially declared to phase out fossil fuels, and just today we see new gas fields being opened in Germany and other places. We see new oil pipelines being installed in Uganda and Tanzania and around the world. After having held all the nice green speeches about the children and the climate, some of the most responsible governments break their own climate targets and greenwash their policies right in front of our very eyes. What were once the big promises from the global north about all the spending and adaptation and loss and damage has turned into a quiet whisper. And yes, we see the oligarchs and the fascists and the war criminals and the populists who are happily erasing all things climate justice, but possibly even worse than that, we see democratic governments, in particular those in the so-called West. We see business leaders and international organizations who are willingly jumping on that very train, on that anti-planet, anti-humanity, anti-solidarity train. And after all, this is not about targets and agreements and high-level decision-making only. This is about human decency. It's about global trust. It's the foundation of everything. It's about that very global trust that is eroding over one broken promise after the other. And yet imagine what could happen otherwise. How those demanding and fighting for climate justice right now could prove that indeed another world is in fact possible after all, that dignity for all after all is non-negotiable. To come there, the first most important step is to acknowledge the urgency. Right now, as we speak, the emissions of some destroy the homes of many. The lifestyle of the richest destroys the livelihoods of the marginalized. Every single day, someone needs to move away, migrate, or flee. Rising seas do not wait for visas. Wildfires do not stop at borders. Collapsing ecosystems do not care whether we have a busy agenda or not. The countries who've contributed to the climate disasters around the world must be held accountable when it comes to compensating and welcoming those affected. And this must change the way that the safest countries in the world discuss migration and respect. As wars and climate catastrophes force people to consider where to spend the future, we need frameworks on justice and climate that could become a desperately needed blueprint for new justice around global mobility. We need legal frameworks to recognize climate displacement not as a loophole, but as a legitimate reason to seek safety. We need early action so that people can adapt before they are forced to move. And we need the wealthiest nations to step up, not just with words, but with reparations, with resources and refuge. This is not about charity, and I feel like I have to daily remind some. It is not about charity, it's about responsibility. And finally, we need leaders and people to fight for every inch of climate action and justice there can possibly be. Do not speak of a future as long as you are allowing to burn it. Do not make promises to your children as long as you take away their hopes for a safe tomorrow. Do not pretend that there can be a peaceful world as long as you allow that very world to run on fossil fuels. Those who are erasing climate justice from the agenda right now want to erase the idea of dignity for all. That is what it is all about. It is not enough to quietly dislike this trend. We need you to stand up against this, to demonstrate that climate justice and dignity for all is a realistic vision as long as a single person out there fights for it. Because after all, what is climate justice? Maybe it's just the moment that we look each other into the eyes and acknowledge each other's humanity. And possibly that is a moment to remember or recall what we owe the future. Do we owe them some resources to plunder? Yes. We owe them some planetary stability? Yes, of course. But most of all, we owe the future the proof that we can figure this out, that humanity, after all, holds the capacity to bring people together and organizing peace and security and freedom for all, no matter where they come from. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luisa. I would like to invite His Excellency Mokgweetsi Masisi, former President of Botswana, to deliver his keynote remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Your Majesty, the King of the Kingdom of Lesotho, that sits in the roof of Africa, King Letsie, honorable ministers here present, heads of delegations, my dear friends from Bosch Foundation. I learned that foundation in German is Stiftung. Stiftung. Yeah, I'll pick up more German. And from the Global Center for Climate Mobility, Prof. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. It's a real honor and a big privilege to be part of the inaugural Berlin Climate Mobility Forum, a very timely initiative by the Global Center for Climate Mobility and the Robert Bosch Stiftung. Did I say it right? It's okay. Good enough. This gathering could not have come at a more critical moment, as global cooperation is tested and multilateralism is at the crossroads. Coming together in the spirit of shared responsibility is both urgent and necessary. Amidst shifting climate patterns and geopolitical uncertainties, we must pause, we must take stock, and we must press forward together. This is particularly true in confronting the climate crisis that is before us. In my own country, in Botswana, which sits in the middle of southern Africa, we're already facing these realities. Though our emissions are negligible, like for most in the developing world, we endure the full force of climate extremes. These, among others, are record heat, prolonged and unimagined droughts, floods, fires. Yeah, we do have some wildflowers too, but wildfires and erratic rains. These changes threaten access to water, to food production, and to public health. Really similar challenges to what's been stated. Even our mining sector, where we extract our most valuable raw resources, are affected as both machinery and workers strain under inexplicable rising temperatures. Earlier this year, flash floods devastated communities and infrastructure like never before. Wildfires too. Wildlife too is being displaced, disrupting ecosystems and affecting human settlements. And in our case, when wildlife is disrupted, it affects the local populace, including the incoming valuable populace who come as tourists. And our most iconic species, the elephant, is all over the country. Just 3 days ago, one had to be put down just outside the richest diamond mine in the world, in Jwaneng, which is really in the semi-desert, and not a place you would normally find elephants. And so it pleases me more than anything else to be in the midst of a very senior, distinguished German government representative. 1 month in office you might be, but our offer from Botswana still remains of donating our 20,000 elephants to Germany. Recognizing these risks, Botswana and the Global Center for Climate Mobility are working in partnership to anticipate climate force displacement and strengthen the resilience of our communities. Botswana has championed this since COP27, when the Africa Climate Mobility Initiative and the landmark Africa Shifts report were launched. That moment clarified both the risks and the opportunities that are before us. As we confront the challenges of the climate crisis, Botswana can leverage on its experiences in overcoming past difficulties. We have successfully managed the HIV pandemic and driven down infection rates. We were able to develop our country based on successful negotiations with multinational corporations such as De Beers. For more than half a century, we developed a joint successful partnership and formed a company called Debswana, a 50-50 owned partnership. And so with this spirit in mind, I want to urge those from the private sector here, and certainly the lead in the Robert Bosch Foundation, to export, to reproduce this capacity to partner for a good cause, whether it's through the establishment of more foundations in other countries and or through the refocusing of those with wealth to ensure that we focus on critical issues such as climate mobility. We can draw on these experiences to fight for a fair deal on climate finance. It is imperative that the needs of the most vulnerable countries and communities guide our negotiations and the allocation of resources. Adaptation is a priority, and localization is key. In Botswana, farmers are already adapting. We're planting drought-resistant crops, we're using smarter irrigation systems, and holding fast to our tested way of life. They are adamant in protecting their right to stay. Governments must honor that resolve by delivering more financial and technical support for local climate adaptation actions that are community-led, practical, and sustained to be more inclusive. Still, there are moments when moving is but the only option. When homes are no longer safe, we must ensure that those at risk can move in safety and in dignity, whether it's temporary or through planned relocation. For this, we need sound, strong, efficient data, strong policies, and inclusive processes. People must be empowered to make informed decisions, guided but never abandoned. Regional cooperation is critical. As a citizen of the Southern African Development Community, our regional economic organization, it is my strong conviction that we can work across borders to shape solutions that are shared, particularly that the consequences of climate change and mobility do not respect borders or sovereignty. Our renewable energy potential offers answers to water and cooling challenges, and our traditions, often mirrored in modern nature-based solutions, are the roots of our resilience. As leaders and as champions, we must support our citizens in protecting their right to stay. No one wants to leave the places they call home and the land of their ancestors by choice. Positive adaptation is not only a single act, but should be a journey that's ongoing, that's shaped with affected populations. Forums such as the Berlin Forum will allow us to share lessons. We will build partnerships and shape international support that is principled and practical. To our partners in Europe, I urge you to stand with us, not only out of responsibility, but out of shared interest. And be reminded, we also too stood with you, particularly in your time of crisis, of warfare, as recently as 1945 in the Second World War, when we sent our troops to Europe. And they paid with their lives. Many from my own country remained and reproduced themselves in the southern part of Italy. I don't know if there are any Italian cousins here. Europe's Green Deal and pursuit of climate neutrality must also resonate globally, not only through reducing emissions, but by uplifting adaptation and enabling just community transition and positive adaptation journeys. Investing in education, skills, and local infrastructure can help people move with dignity and purpose, contributing to resilience and prosperity in both origin and destination communities. Let climate cooperation be the ground where multilateralism thrives once again. Not a zero-sum game, but a shared gain. Do not leave this to others. In closing, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the Global Center for Climate Mobility and its leadership, and to the Robert Bosch Stiftung, Foundation for convening this very important forum. Let us deliberate with ambition, and we must act with unity. I thank you immensely for your attention.
Thank you very much, President Masisi. This concludes the first part of this high-level opening session. We've heard about broken promises, the need to rebuild, restore trust, and continue nurturing trust. And we've also heard that climate mobility is at the heart about the fight for people's homes and the fight for their dignity. And with that, I would like to ask our colleagues, our high-level guests, to take their seats on the floor. And I will invite our next panel to the stage, but please give them a round of applause.